China's debt trap diplomacy. In less than a decade, China has given loans to over 100 countries, more than the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and Asian Development Bank combined. How many of these nations are sinking under the debt borrowed from China? China has been following a new geopolitical strategy, to exert its influence by force, by pinning down poor nations into their debt trap, and forcibly occupying their territory, when they are unable to pay back the debt. This policy is widely called as debt trap diplomacy, a phrase coined by an Indian strategist and author, Brahma Chelani, and the phrase instantly gained in popularity around the world. Ever since Xi Jinping became the president of China, in 2012, he has had a voracious appetite to grow China's global influence, or, more accurately, dominance. To achieve his goals, Xi Jinping was willing to employ all tricks, and didn't care for morals, ethics, or international rules. In 2013, Xi Jinping announced a grand idea of linking China with many parts of the world, both by land and by sea, and named it as One Belt One Road, or OBOR, for short. OBOR was supposed to be the modern equivalent of the ancient Silk Road, that was used as the trade route, by China, to connect with most countries located to their west. OBOR was later renamed as Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, and its focus switched to infrastructure projects, including ports, railway lines and highways. The Chinese leader, Xi Jinping, followed an expansionist policy, since the time he took over China, in 2012, claiming territories belonging to almost all of China's neighbors, and thereby creating conflicts. However, it was not entirely known at the early stages of BRI, Xi Jinping planned to use BRI, as a geopolitical strategy, to achieve the expansionist policy objective. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, smaller nations were first enticed with mega infrastructure projects. China would lend them money with severely restrictive clauses on the contract, and at high interest rates, compared to other international banks. To add to the misery of the borrowers, the contract was written with the clause that all legal disputes would be placed under an arbitration court in China. As you know, the Chinese courts work under the direction of the Chinese Communist Party, and hence the chance of any justice for the indebted nation is just a pipe dream. It's like a contract between a wolf and a lamb, where disputes are decided on the wolf's court. When the poor nations fail to repay their loans, China will then take possession of their land assets. These assets usually are then used for strategic military objectives by China, building naval ports, creating Chinese intelligence posts, and Chinese military bases. The small, poorer, indebted nations, then become completely under the control of China, as they don't possess the capacity to oppose China economically, or militarily. In other words, these nations are caught in a debt trap, being under the mercy of China, and are forced to develop stronger diplomatic ties with China, in the hope of getting a lenient treatment. Hence the phrase, China's debt trap diplomacy. Now, the obvious question is, what if a small nation refuses to accept the BRI project? It all depends on how badly China wants to grab land on that country, based on its strategic importance to China. The deeper its desire to establish a Chinese post, the harder the push by China to accept the loans, under the guise of BRI. If the government of these smaller nations refuse to accept the BRI project, then China interferes into their political system, by helping one party over the other, favors a totalitarian, corrupt regime, that favors China. They pursue their political intervention vigorously, until they succeed in toppling a regime, and installing their puppet government, in these small countries. Once the puppet government is installed, China continues with their loan giving, and very soon control the nation completely. If it sounds like a mafia system, you are not alone in believing that. Many journalists, who realized the extent of the Chinese design, have used the comparison with mafia. China understands how the Western view is shaped by their media, and hence wanted to change the narrative, and influence the people. China has had a long-standing policy of infiltrating and influencing the media of other countries, with their corrupt practices, and many Western reporters, and columnists, including from the US, and the UK, are very much in their system. The reporters help China's image, assigning a theory, that the overwhelming evidence, produced by all news organizations, about China's entrapment of poor nations, and to warn the world of China's debt trap policy, is just anti-China propaganda. It may sound incredible, but by 2022, there are many case studies that prove China's strategy, leaving not much to wonder, what China's real objectives are, with their Belt and Road Initiative project. One of the favorite targets of China has been the African nations, though China believes, its prized possessions are the European countries. Though there are very many nations that have become victims of China's predatory lending, we can only cover a handful, which we consider show the diversity in the expansion of the Chinese tentacles. Djibouti, a coastal city of East Africa, borrowed to develop a strategic port with Chinese loans. With corruption, and cost overruns, the loans swelled in size, and now the Chinese loans total around 77% of Djibouti's total debt, which is around 80% of its GDP. China dictated terms to Djibouti, and a Chinese military base was set up there, in 2017. In the case of Democratic Republic of Congo, located in South-Central Africa, the debt level reached $2.5 billion, a huge debt for a poor country, like Congo. China's interest with Congo lied in exploitation of the huge mineral reserves, including cobalt, a key ingredient found in most batteries, used in electric vehicles. The usage of child laborers, and inhuman condition on this war-torn country, acts as a perfect playground for the Chinese masters. Kenya and South Africa are two of the other major African nations, which have taken heavy loans from China, and are reeling under its pressure. One of the classic cases of debt trap diplomacy, quoted most in the media is Sri Lanka. With the corrupt Rajapaksa government firmly on the Chinese side, China entrapped Sri Lanka with huge loans to build infrastructure, including Hambantota Port, which later was leased to China for 99 years. It was learnt that China pushed Sri Lanka into borrowing money from Chinese banks to pay for the project, with the absolute knowledge that there was no prospect of its commercial success. By then, Sri Lanka's debt burden was $51 billion, and 95% of its government revenue was going to debt servicing. Sri Lanka has been through such a deep financial crisis in 2022, that even basic essentials like food, fuel and medicine couldn't be purchased. India sent in massive amount of wheat, fuel, and medicine to Sri Lanka's aid since April 2022. Pakistan has maintained a very close friendship with China for a long time, due to their hatred of a common enemy, India. This allowed China easy access into Pakistan, to experiment with a massive project, part of BRI, called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, a $50 billion venture. After having borrowed $30 billion for CPEC, Pakistan is caught deep in debt, as of April 2022. Experts claim that it'll require 40 years, to pay back its debt to China. A number of scholars have said, that the CPEC subordinated Pakistan's interest to China, and is a threat to Pakistan's sovereignty. Maldives, a quiet peaceful island on the Indian Ocean, has been pulled into the debt trap, where $1.4 billion loan was given, forcibly by China, which amounts to 78% of the country's external debt. According to a report by the Center for Global Development, CGD, Maldives is one of the 8 countries that's likely to sink under China's debt trap in the near future. Montenegro, an European Balkan nation, and a neighbor of Serbia, was loaned around $1 billion to build a highway, with the contract stating that a default on repayment will lead to China getting the right to own Montenegrin assets, used as a collateral. China has direct interest in seeing its BRI projects fail economically. China's interest in Montenegro is to get a direct entry into Europe. Montenegrin debt to China is around 66% of its entire GDP, and 25% of all its public debt. Other countries in Europe which have gotten large debt from China include Greece and Italy. Greece was one of the first NATO members to show interest in Chinese infrastructure and loans. Owing to its debt to China, Greece had to take the Chinese side diplomatically in the past few years, obstructing European Union plans to condemn China over maritime violations and human rights issues. Italy, another debt-ridden country, went the Greek way, endorsing BRI and announcing deals worth multiple billions of euros, which would lead to borrowing huge amount in loans from China, if implemented. With Greece, China has made massive inroads into their shipping ports. China's involvement in the port of Piraeus, via its state-owned China Ocean Shipping Corporation, COSCO, has been a particular concern for the entire region of Europe, though COSCO has taken stakes in at least 15 European ports, including the Dutch port of Rotterdam, Belgian port of Antwerp, and the French port of Marseille. A recent aid data report capturing 13,427 Chinese projects, across 165 countries, over an 18-year period, discovered that 35% of the BRI infrastructure project portfolio has encountered major implementation problems. Corruption scandals, labor violations, environmental hazards, and public protests are among the leading causes. Surprisingly, the researchers discovered that infrastructure projects, outside of BRI, had fewer implementation issues. The COVID-19 pandemic, and other unavoidable shockwaves, have suffocated China's BRI initiatives in Pakistan, the Maldives, Bangladesh, and Nepal. One obvious question pops in our head. If BRI-associated debt trap is so bad, you may ask, why do countries even borrow money from China for their BRI projects? Well, the answer is simple. Unlike the World Bank, or IMF, China never asks the borrowing nations to go for market liberalization, provide more freedom to its people or press, and doesn't wonder how much of that money is siphoned by the corrupt politicians or authorities. China's objectives are simple. They want the nation to be in a position, unable to pay the debt, so they can grab either the infrastructure they built, or other strategic real estate, to establish a military and intelligence presence in the long term. For those objectives, they prefer corrupt, totalitarian regimes to be in power, where there is no criticism, and no freedom of speech. We can only hope countries don't fall for the debt trap diplomacy engaged by China. Thanks for watching.